Hello everyone. This is the 26th part of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Chapter 83, First Expedition, and Guiding Growth. I need to rethink my life choices, sighed Quinn as he walked towards the Great Lake. It was the start of January, and Quinn had just returned to Hogwarts after the Christmas break. The weather was the coldest of the year. Snow was falling almost constantly, and it covered the entire landscape around Hogwarts in white. In that heavy snow, Quinn was out of the warmth of the castle. He was about to start his expedition to the landlocked, freshwater lake that served as a natural reserve for magical marine creatures. "Why am I going swimming in January?" muttered Quinn to himself as he stomped his foot on the ground. Half a dome of the earth arose from underneath the white snow. Why couldn't it be April or later, or any time that is warmer? Then, the water would feel nice. Quinn removed the many layers of clothes he was wearing and stuffed them into a small string bag with a minor expansion charm cast on it, leaving behind a pair of swimming trunks on his body. He tightened the string to squeeze shut the opening and stuck it to the inside surface of the dome. With a tap, the half-dome closed itself to form a full dome. Surrounding snow climbed the earth dome, covering it with white to camouflage it into the snowy surroundings. This is cold," Quinn breathed the chilly wind and exhaled icy mist. His skin was covered with goose pimples. However, Quinn wasn't shivering, nor were his teeth chattering due to the cold. Despite not having cast heating charms on his body, Quinn was used to this level of cold because he had suffered worse in the icy vault. Even though he used blood magic in the vault, he could still feel an amount of chill, so this wasn't that big of a deal to Quinn. "Let's do this." Quinn rubbed his hands to generate heat as he waded into the water. Oh yeah, now this cold, he felt the cold water against his skin, searing as though it was fire and not icy water. Quinn sucked in a sharp breath when he felt the chill from the water before his condition returned to normal as heating charms worked their charm to warm up his body. The icy water wasn't cold enough to warrant the use of blood magic. Blood magic was to deal with cold that could literally kill you within minutes. As Quinn walked into the lake, water rose and the depth of the lake increased. Just when the water was at his chest level, a bubble appeared on the lower half of his face, forming a mask covering his nose, mouth, cheeks, jaw, and extended down to his neck. For his first deep water expedition, Quinn had cast a bubble head charm that produced a bubble around the caster's face, giving them a continuous supply of oxygen and allowing them to breathe where they could not otherwise. Submerging himself into the water, Quinn pushed himself off the stone floor and dove into the lake. The bubble head charm did its work and Quinn was able to breathe normally. Silence pressed upon his ears as he soared over a strange, dark, foggy landscape. He could only see 10 feet around him so, as he swam through the water, new scenes seemed to loom suddenly out of the oncoming darkness. Rippling forests, tangled black weed, wide plains of mud, littered with dull, glimmering stones. He swam deeper and deeper, out toward the middle of the lake. His eyes widened, and he stared through the eerily grey-lit water around him and the shadows beyond, where the water became opaque. Small fish flickered past him like silver darts. Once or twice he thought he saw something larger moving ahead of him, but when Quinn got nearer, he discovered it to be nothing but a large, blackened log or a dense clump of weed. Light green weed stretched ahead of him as far as he could see, 2 feet deep, like a meadow of very overgrown grass. Quinn was staring unblinkingly ahead of him, trying to discern shapes through the darkness, and then, without warning, something grabbed hold of his ankle. He twisted his body around and saw a Grindylow, a small pale green-skinned, horned water demon, poking out of the weed, its long fingers clutching tightly around Quinn's leg, its pointed fangs bared. Quinn sighed under his protective bubble, and a burst of magic from Quinn's foot blasted the tiny water demon away. A small group of Grindylows emerged from the weeds and tried to latch onto Quinn, but they crashed into an invisible shield before getting blasted off like the first one. The tiny water demons didn't seem to understand the situation from watching their brethren getting blasted off, as more and more jumped out of the weeds, trying to latch onto Quinn. Their target stood still in his spot and continued to eject them far away from him, pelting them with magic as their green skins grew angry red patches. Quinn didn't run away from the waves of Grindylows and just kept shooting at them like it was some fun game, and the tiny suckers kept coming out of the weeds, trying to get their tiny claws on Quinn. This is fun. It's like a first-person shooter, chuckled Quinn under his protection. He continued to shoot at them for a couple of minutes before the Grindylows understood what was happening and stopped attacking Quinn. They retreated back into the weeds and froze, peeking at him with their leafy green eyes. Quinn swam away, and after swimming for a while, he turned full circle in the water, the silence pressing harder than ever against his eardrums. Quinn knew he must be even deeper in the lake now, but nothing was moving but the rippling weed. I am lost, thought Quinn, and decided to swim to the surface to gain a sense of his location. Swimming up to the surface, Quinn saw he had swum further to the south and away from the castle. He had moved towards the Hogsmeade train station and the dock from where the first-year students boarded their boats to get to the castle. I need to swim westwards, said Quinn, moving his hair out of his face. Quinn had observed the Kraken's tentacles, and he was able to deduce that the Kraken's main body hung out somewhere to the castle's west. Quinn had given the giant squid being a Kraken theory a thought while he was home. True giant squids, genus Architeuthis, 1, were deep-sea dwelling creatures and cannot live in freshwater, such as inland lochs in Scotland. It would not be able to stand the sunlight, pressure, salinity, or lack thereof, of the water, the space, or the lack of food. At one point during the books, it was fed bread, which it could not digest. Giant squids also had very tender skin that would break if touched, but the cephalopod giant living in the Great Lake could push out children who fell into the lake. This meant that the Hogwarts giant squid was of a magical species, and the Kraken was exactly the creature that would match the magical counterpart of the non-magical giant squid. Lucky that this one isn't a violent ship-sinking monster but a semi-domesticated, peace-loving school pet that loves to chill, thought Quinn as he dove back into the water and headed west. This time around, Quinn swam a bit higher over the weed to avoid any more Grindylows that might be lurking there. He swam on for what felt like at least 30 minutes. He passed over vast expanses of black mud now, which murkily swirled as he disturbed the water. This is getting tiring, thought Quinn. He started to feel tired. He had already been swimming for over 50 minutes. I need to learn magic that makes swimming easier, or at least I need to make some diving fins, thought Quinn. Then, he stopped swimming for a second and looked at his feet. The next second, he conjured a pair of swimming fins on his feet. Alrighty, that was easy. Good job. Another 10 minutes and Quinn finally caught a glimpse of the Kraken's tentacle. The giant and long tentacle laid on the lake's bottom floor and covered a large surface area. He swam up to create some distance between him and the tentacle and slowly swam forward, watching as the tentacle got thicker and thicker. Merlin's beard, what I saw outside of the water was just the tip of the iceberg, wasn't it? As Quinn felt amazed by the side of the Kraken's tentacle. The end of said tentacle slowly rose and crept in the water, moving towards the tiny human who had gotten deep into its territory. And just when it got near Quinn, the tentacle sped up and moved in for the grab. What? He. Quinn, who was busy being amazed at the Kraken, suddenly was in the tip of the tentacle in his peripheral vision. The Kraken was trying to wrap its tentacle around him, it was trying to trap him. On instinct, Quinn released a magic force field shield which covered him 360 degrees. At first, the tentacle wrapped gently around the shield, but the next second, Quinn felt a tremendous force exerted from the tentacle as it tried to tighten its wrap around Quinn's safeguard. Shit! The force field shield strained as Quinn pushed more magic into the force field shield, trying desperately to maintain the structural integrity. The Kraken, who had spotted a tiny human in its territory, wanted to grab him, but it was confused because something was stopping his tentacles from reaching him. It took the Kraken a few seconds to realize that the tiny human had magic around, so it stopped trying to reach the human. What felt like an eternity of struggle to Quinn was just 3 measly seconds before the squeezing force vanished. Quinn opened his tightly shut eyes with heavy breathing and he felt himself move. Afterwards, he saw that the tentacle wrapped around his shield was lifting him up. What is it doing? Where is it taking me? The tentacle took Quinn out of the water. The force field, which was still active, trapped the lake water inside the force field. From outside, it looked like the tentacle was holding a sphere of water with Quinn inside. I need to get away, thought Quinn. He immediately deactivated the force field, and immediately Quinn dropped down towards the water. The tentacle was holding onto the force field, so when Quinn released the magic, the water inside with Quinn slipped away from the tentacle's grasp. Unfortunately for Quinn, the Kraken was one step ahead of him. Another tentacle was waiting for him in the water. The second tentacle rose from the lake's surface and captured Quinn in one of its suction cups. Because of the sheer size of the Kraken, the suction cups lining its tentacles were huge. Quinn was swallowed inside the suction cup. He was trapped to his neck inside the suction cup. Foo dash. Arg. Quinn struggled against the Kraken's bounds. He wanted to get out of here and was really tempted to use magic to tear through the Kraken's flesh. The only thing holding him back was because even though the Kraken had trapped him, it was only trapping him and not choking him out. Plus, the Kraken's reputation for decades was one of a friendly and peaceful creature. The Kraken's tentacle moved in the air and stopped right over the lakeside. The suction cup holding Quinn released its hold and unceremoniously dropped him onto the ground like a sack of potatoes. Quinn immediately stood up and vigilantly stared at the retreating tentacle. He was sure that the tentacle gave him a wave as it returned inside the water. What in the world just happened? He wasn't sure what happened. Quinn had swum for close to an hour, and just when he finally reached the Kraken, Neptune's bane, he was caught and ejected back to the land. Looking around, Quinn found he was on the lakeside, which was near the herbology greenhouses. My clothes bag is in the opposite direction, grumbled Quinn as he peered at the opposite bank of the Great Lake. I don't want to walk. I am so tired. With slumped shoulders, Quinn dried himself off the lake water. He conjured clothes over his body and started the long walk towards the other side of the lake to get his clothes back. Damn it, that was humiliating, thought Quinn as he walked. He was thinking about what to do next. From today Quinn had understood that if he got too close to the Kraken's body, it would eject him out of the lake. If he wanted to get to the vault, then he would have to get past the Kraken. I need to be faster, he thought based on today's events. First, I can't spend half an hour just to get near the Kraken. I need to find a way to get there faster than before. Second, I have to gain control while I am inside the water. The Kraken has too many tentacles, but I have the size advantage. I'm shorter, so I can evade him. To do that, though, I need to gain speed and nimbleness in my swimming. The gears in Quinn's mind turned as he pondered what magic would help him out in this situation. Water magic is definitely a plus, nothing better than water magic inside water. I could probably use it as jets to increase my speed so I can move much faster. It will also improve the things I can do while I'm under the water. As long as the Kraken doesn't have water magic capabilities, then I will be able to outmaneuver past him. He brushed a hand through his hair and prayed. Let's hope that whatever the vault is, it's inside some kind of building or room, because I don't want to work on the vault, while continuously evading the Kraken trying to get me out of water. The next part of the problem was Quinn's surviving under the water. A human being like himself wasn't meant to stay in the water for extended amounts of time. Sure, he was athletic enough to swim for a long time, but if he was going to stay deep beneath the surface, then it would become dangerous. The bubblehead charm is not durable enough, it might break if I'm not careful. I can't take that kind of risk, speculated Quinn and cracked his neck as he continued to walk. I need to find another source of oxygen, this one will need to be more durable and needs to last as long as I need. Quinn had some ideas on achieving the solution to the oxygen problem, but it would need some study and research because his method required some finesse and delicate magic work. This is going to be a fun year. Scene break. It was late at night inside Quinn, Eddie, and Marcus's dorm room, and all three residents were ready to go to bed. Quinn, do you have any idea about the ministry notice? Asked Marcus from his bed. I heard someone talking about a notice. Do you have any idea what it is about? Quinn, who was reading a book on Transmigration from the Caribbean region, closed his book and turned his face towards Marcus. It's about Hogsmeade. The attack by the Novellus Axionites triggered the ministry, so they are taking some precautions, answered Quinn. Then, he got up from his bed. He walked to his study table in his dorm room and opened a drawer. He took out a sheet of paper. This is a copy of the notice, informed Quinn as he walked towards Marcus' bed to hand him the paper. Elliot had sent him the copy of the notice by the Magi fax installed at the West Manor. The ministry notice was accompanied by a letter. The letter advised that if Quinn wanted things from Hogsmeade, then he should preferably get them by mail order, and if he absolutely needed to visit Hogsmeade, he was to keep his visits short as possible. Marcus received the paper and read the ministry notice. By order of the Ministry of Magic. We have the duty to inform you that, until further notice, Dementors from Azkaban will be patrolling the streets of Hogsmeade every night after sundown. This measure has been put in place for the safety of the Hogsmeade residents and will be lifted when the ministry brings the terrorist group going by the name of Novellus Axionites. It is therefore advisable that you complete your shopping well before nightfall. Happy and prosperous New Year. Eddie also got curious, so he got up from his bed and walked over to Marcus's bed. He took the notice paper after Marcus was done reading it and read it. Are they serious? Eddie asked as he dropped the notice on Marcus' bed. They are putting Dementors in Hogsmeade? Isn't that a little too much? What is wrong with appointing some Aurors in the village? I guess they were thinking that if Dementors patrolled Hogwarts, then why not Hogsmeade, speculated Quinn, shrugging as he spoke. It will not be good for business, though. Marcus, who heard Quinn's answer, asked a question in response. Do you think the ministry is still restricting the DMLE? By placing Dementors at Hogsmeade, are they trying to keep the Aurors away from the case? Marcus recalled the talk he and Eddie had with Quinn regarding the friction between the ministry and the DMLE. This situation, to Marcus, that is, allowing Dementors to patrol Hogsmeade, seemed like the minister's faction was still trying to restrict Aurors' office's movements. Quinn plopped himself down on Marcus' bed and said, I'm not sure if this is because of politics or because of the Dementors themselves. Dementors? What do they have to do with this? Asked Eddie, confused. The situation was because of the minister's faction and the DMLE. He couldn't see how the Dementors fit into this situation. The Dementors feed off from the positive feelings. I don't know their level of sapience, but it is clear that they are sentient enough to taste and sense fear, as they are drawn to it and the promise of positive memories, continued Quinn. They obeyed the Ministry of Magic for years because, in guarding Azkaban, they were provided with the sustenance of any remaining hope or happiness from the prisoners. But now a lot of them are away from their food table, Azkaban. And Dumbledore doesn't allow them inside the castle, so they must have been growing restless for some time, furious at his refusal to let them inside the grounds. So I suppose the ministry is trying to appease the Dementors by allowing them to patrol Hogsmeade at night. Marcus rubbed his temple and sighed. This is also confusing. Some of the conversations that Marcus, Eddie, and Quinn had this year were politics-related, and those conversations made both Marcus and Eddie increasingly involved in politics. Both of Quinn's roommates had started to think about the ministry and what was happening around them. Quinn personally had seen both of his friends exchange thoughts on articles they had read in the newspaper, and talk about things they hadn't addressed before. And the divide in the ministry due to the Novellus Axionites was at the forefront in many of their conversations. Why don't you write letters to your parents? Write to them asking what they think about the current situation, suggested Quinn, while trying to provide them a way to gain more insight on the topic. Of course, I'm not saying to follow whatever they say. Just hear whatever they have to say and think about how you feel about it. Look up for more facts and get a complete picture. Maybe, then, you will be able to get a clear picture that would erase any confusion. Quinn was trying to make his friends people with critical thinking. People who weren't like the sheep that abounded the British Magical Society. He wanted them to be free thinkers, and, given the situation, having them form their own political views was a good start. People like Albus Dumbledore had an image in the public's mind that bordered worship. It made people trust him without giving it a second thought. And one thing George had taught Quinn was that blind trust was just like nails. The longer you have them, the more dangerous they get. Quinn didn't want his friends to become like the sheep that was everybody. He didn't need yes-men around him who just followed whatever he said. While that sounded good in a way, Quinn wanted the people with whom he interacted to be winners and not losers who couldn't think for themselves. Eddie and Marcus nodded at Quinn's suggestion of writing to their parents, and that brought a smile to Quinn's friends. It was a start. Chapter 84, Interactive Learning, An Illusion of Help. Humming a pleasant tune, Quinn walked towards his office, ready to start another shift of quality consultation. I wonder how many will come today, wondered Quinn, thinking about what kind of problems he would get to see today. On an average day, Quinn would get maybe 2 to 3 customers. They would bring their problems to him, expecting a solution. Let's hope that some of them are non-homework related problems, sighed Quinn, hoping that something interesting would come along. Homework-related requests consisted of Quinn giving homework-related resources to the clients and charging a few nuts for the information. The problem with this kind of problem was that there was no margin for getting students under his debt. He couldn't do their homework for them as that would attract unwanted attention from professors, and second, he didn't want to do people's homework. Quinn reached the office door and twisted the doorknob to open the door. He already knew that his assistant was already in there, so he didn't bother reaching for the key. When he opened the door, Quinn saw Luna sitting on his office bar stool behind his table with a client sitting in front of the table. The chime above the door rang, alerting the occupants of Quinn's entrance, causing both of them to look at him. He greeted them. "Good evening." Luna, who had her wand tucked behind her ear, waved a hand to Quinn and greeted him back. "Good evening." The client simply nodded when he saw Quinn but didn't verbally greet him. Quinn nodded back in response before silently walking to the workshop door and entering the workshop after unlocking the door. He didn't take over the conversation from Luna and let her deal with the client as talking with people was what he had hired her for. He set his book bag down and removed his robe. Luna knocked on the door before entering the workshop. "He has brought an interesting request," informed Luna, twirling a few strands of her hair with her fingers. Quinn had told her to call him if the request was interesting. It had taken some time before Quinn successfully taught Luna what he meant by interesting, but eventually, Quinn and Luna came to the same page on what interesting meant. "All right, I'll be there," replied Quinn and asked a question. "Are you done with your homework?" "Aha, I'm done," responded Luna in a sing-song voice. "I just need to bottle the potion in a vial for the class." "Excellent," praised Quinn before asking. "What about my assignments? How is the progress on that?" Ever since Quinn had hired Luna, he had been giving her topics to study every week. Sometimes it would be theory, other times, it would be practical. He had given her easy study topics, asked her to practice spells until she got used to them, or long-term projects like growing herbs and keeping track of their progress. He had been giving her fun stuff like treasure map hunts and riddles, just like Friar gave him, but in place of deadly vaults, he had been placing mystery objects around the castle that Luna needed to find, and figure out how to solve/open them to get the treasure inside. Every mystery object would require some kind of transfiguration, charms, herbology, or potion brewing to open, making learning more fun for the quirky and eccentric Luna. Quinn wanted Luna to learn and utilize more magic because teenage years were the age where magic grew more rapidly, and he wanted Luna to take advantage of it. He understood that people wouldn't go to the extremes like him by exhausting his magic core every day, but he could make sure that Luna would use more magic while making it fun. All the assignments and projects that Quinn gave Luna were interconnected with each other. Quinn had planned out things so when she completed her 5th year, Luna would be done with her N.E.W.T level education in all subjects other than care of magical creatures, practical portion, as bringing creatures into Hogwarts was a hassle. But if Canon Luna was anything of reference, then he was sure that his Luna would somehow cover that portion on her own. On top of that, he intended to closely monitor her progress to see if Luna was progressing faster because if she showed more interest in learning, he would put in extra things that he thought she would learn and things that Luna would find interesting. He didn't burden her with complicated things beyond her level or dump lengthy assignments which would eat away all her time. But he wanted to make sure that Luna would complete her N.E.W.T education by the end of her 5th year because, by that time, Quinn would be at the end of his 7th year, and that meant graduation, aka, he would be leaving Hogwarts. Newt-level education by the end of the 5th year wasn't much of a challenge because a 5th-year student with a wand did have enough focus ability to perform all the 7th-year magic there was in the curriculum. And with Quinn making study plans fitting to Luna's needs and aptitude, he was sure that not only would Luna understand N.E.W.T level topics, but she would also have better magic capacity and control than her peers. Luna twirled on the spot and smiled in a fun way. "I'm still working on the blank parchment and riddle that you gave me." Quinn smiled as he thought of the riddle and blank parchment. The blank parchment was a secret treasure map, and the riddle was the clue to a potion that would make the treasure map visible, and another indication that would give her a clue on how to open the mystery object that he had hid. "I see. Well, keep working on it," said Quinn, ruffling her hair. Now that he had caught up with her, Quinn asked, "So what is he here for?" Luna's answer put a smile on his face. "Now that is an interesting request, all right," smiled Quinn. He knew exactly how to solve the client's problem, but he wasn't expecting this particular request to come through his doors. He walked to the office and looked at the client as he sat down on his bar stool behind his desk. "Mr. Longbottom, you have brought one interesting request. Tell me, what made you request something like this from us?" On the client's stool sat Neville Longbottom, round-faced, short, chubby but not overly fat, brown hair. The Longbottom child was clumsy, forgetful, shy, and many considered him ill-suited for Gryffindor House because he seemed timid. He was the other child who qualified to be the prophecy child in Sybil Trelawney's prophecy, as he was the child of the Longbottom couple, who had defied Voldemort thrice. Fortunately, Voldemort had decided to target the Potters first and had set in Harry Potter's fate to be the chosen one. I keep forgetting the password to the common room. So I write the passwords on a piece of parchment in case I forget it, but one of the P-prefects caught me as I was looking at my note." Neville's timid voice narrated his story. He was looking down at his lap as he spoke, not making eye contact with Quinn. "He dragged me to Professor McGonagall, and she scolded me for writing the password. Then when I returned to the common room, everybody was laughing at me." Neville looked like he was about to cry. Quinn could literally see tears pooling at the edges of his eyes. "So you have come to me, a Ravenclaw, to help you with the Gryffindor common room pass dash." Neville's ears reddened as he heard Quinn's words and cut him by standing from his bar stool and sputtered, "I'm sorry, this was stupid. Please, excuse me. I will leave." Quinn raised his hand with a smile on his face and stopped Neville. "Not at all, Mr. Longbottom. You have a problem, and you came to us to get a solution. We strive to solve any problem, so no, this isn't stupid." He gestured for Neville to return to his seat. "Please take a seat. I believe I can solve your problem." Neville blinked a couple of times at Quinn before sitting down. This time he made proper eye contact with Quinn, his eyes flashing with hope. "As you said, you always forget the common room password. There is nothing wrong with that." Quinn reassured Neville that this was something very commonplace. "I'm sure a lot of your housemates also forget the password and have it written down somewhere. The prefect who caught you might have been having a bad day, and if not that, then we both can agree that he is a jerk. Badmouthing a third person behind their back, especially if that person wasn't well liked, was a proven way to improve relations between two people." Quinn was using it to make Neville feel comfortable and assert that he wasn't at fault. "From what I know, Gryffindor common room password changes once every 3 weeks, correct?" Neville nodded in response to Quinn's question. Of course, Quinn already knew that. He knew that Gryffindor and Hufflepuff common room passwords changed every 3 weeks, while the Slytherin common room password changed every other week. He had reckoned long enough to figure out the change schedules. "And you sometimes forget it, so you need a way to remember it. That is what you are asking me, correct?" Quinn didn't even go in the direction where Neville didn't forget the password, as that would be a lengthy process that Quinn didn't want to overtake. When Neville nodded, Quinn continued, "Excellent, I have just the solution for you. It will allow you to keep a secret copy of the passwords with no one ever finding out. There will be no parchment trail, you just need to make sure that you are alone when you look at it." Quinn stood up from his seat and spoke, "Please wait a moment, and I will be back with the solution." He left Neville behind in the office and walked into the workshop. Inside the workshop, Luna was lying on the floor intently staring at the riddle parchment. The parchment was levitating above her, with Luna's wand in her hand. As Quinn walked to a potion cupboard, he stared at Luna. It looked like she didn't notice Quinn walking as she kept staring at the parchment. "She's weird," thought Quinn with a smile on his face. Quinn opened a cupboard and searched for a potion vial. It was one of the potions that he had learned to brew before Hogwarts. He brewed it because it sounded fun, and he had all the ingredients lying around. Found it. Taking a vial of inky black potion out of the cupboard, Quinn walked to another part of the room, stepped over Luna's body, and opened a drawer to get a thick calligraphy brush. Once again, Quinn stepped over Luna's body and walked outside to the office, and instead of sitting on his bar stool behind the table, Quinn sat beside Neville in the other client's stool. "We're ready," said Quinn as he set down the potion vial and calligraphy brush on the table. He turned to face Neville and started. "All right, before we start, I would like to explain what is this about in case you don't want to go through this. Quinn needed consent before he did anything. He didn't want complaints after he was done. So this potion is a type of ink that is used on the skin. It is generally used by healers to mark parts on a patient's bodies if ever needed, explained Quinn, picking up the vial off the table. But this is a little different recipe. I changed the recipe so that the ink sinks into the patient's body. That way, if the healer has drawn too many lines, they could hide some lines to avoid clutter. You know, small improvements to increase ease of use. Quinn lifted the sleeve of his left hand and placed a finger on his forearm. I'm going to stain a patch of your forearm in this ink and then change it so that it will read the Gryfinder common room password. When you need the password, you can make it appear, and when you're done, you can hide it. Quinn looked up at Neville and asked, "Any questions?" "Will it hurt?" asked Neville with a wince in his voice. "Not at all," assured Quinn as he picked up the calligraphy brush from the table and showed it to Neville. "I'm going to use this brush to paint some ink on your arm. It might tickle, but after that, you won't feel anything. It won't hurt even when you make the ink appear or when you hide it." Neville looked relieved to hear that it wouldn't hurt. Neville thought that Quinn was a cool person, and he didn't want to cry in front of him. Plus, there was that other girl inside, and if he cried she might come out and see him cry. "We need a code word to make the ink appear," said Quinn. He wanted a code word that would reveal the password. "Tell me, Neville, what is your favorite tree, herb, plant, or any flora?" Neville tilted his head confused, wondering why Quinn was asking like this, but answered nevertheless. "Chamomile." "Excellent, then that will be your code word," clapped Quinn, smiling at Neville. He knew Neville was a herbology lover, so assigning the code word as Neville's favorite plant would make sure that Neville would never forget it. Or I could have just used his name as the code word, but that is so boring, thought Quinn before speaking. "Now, let's get started and ink your forearm. Lift your sleeve and hold it in place." Quinn uncorked the vial and dipped the calligraphy brush into the vial. He waited as Neville clumsily pulled up his sleeve and awkwardly held it in place. "All right, let's begin." Quinn removed the brush from the vial and gently painted a stroke back and forth, drawing nothing in particular and just trying to put more and more ink on Neville's hand. After half a minute, Quinn felt that the ink was enough for any phrase that would be chosen as the Gryfinder common room password. "I think this is enough," said Quinn as he placed the brush on the table and pulled out his fake wand. Placing the wand tip on the inked area, Quinn fake chanted, "Immutatio." The ink moved on Neville's skin and took the form of the words, "Factor, nonverba dot." As Quinn removed the wand tip to observe the result, Neville asked with his jaw open in shock, "How did you know the password?" "That isn't something you should waste your time thinking about, Mr. Longbottom. Some things aren't meant to be known, and this is one of them. Sometimes not knowing is better. Knowledge can turn into a curse if you're not careful." Quinn's voice was smooth and had a slower than usual flow to it, which made his words sound silky. It stopped Neville from trying to continue the questioning. The Gryfinder gulped while nodding, deciding to forget he had asked that question. "Please take out your wand and place it on the inked words," instructed Quinn. Neville used the hand holding his sleeve to take out his father's wand, giving Quinn the chance to magically fold Neville's sleeve properly, unlike the awkward crumpled way Neville had done. "Say chamomile to set it as the code word," said Quinn as he once again placed his fake wand tip on the inked words. Neville nervously placed his wand beside Quinn's and spoke, "Chamomile." The ink flashed, affirming that the code word was set, and immediately the ink disappeared as they sunk into Neville's skin, leaving behind no signs. "Try saying the code word to see if it is working," instructed Quinn. Neville spoke chamomile with his wand tip pressed against his skin, and the words factor, nonverba appeared on his skin. Neville's eyes flashed with happiness as he repeatedly spoke chamomile, making the words appear and vanish on his skin. Thank you," said Neville, a smile on his face. He was relieved that now he wouldn't have to keep a parchment with the password written on it. He could just whip out his wand and would have the password on his hand. "No worries. But you will have to come back every time the password changes so I can modify the words. Plus, this ink will slowly dissipate from your body, so you need to come back here to refill the ink." Neville nodded without any discomfort or reluctance. He was ready to come here as long as he was able to keep the password in his hand. "What do I have to pay?" asked Neville. He was so happy that he was ready to empty his pocket money into Quinn's hands. "Oh, about that, no need to pay me anything," smiled Quinn as he stood up with Neville following him. Quinn extended his hand for a handshake with Neville and spoke. "I scratch your back, you'll scratch mine. This was just me helping you out, so when in the future I need your help, help me out." "You'll help me out, right, Neville?" Neville repeatedly nodded as he spoke. "Of course, I will help you. I will help you with anything." "This is great, thank you." "Thank you so much." "No worries. Come back anytime you want," said Quinn with a kind and helpful smile. After Neville left, Quinn cleaned up things and sat behind his table, thinking about Neville Longbottom's request. While it seemed that Quinn had helped Neville with his request, the truth was that Neville was no better than before he entered the AID offices. Quinn hadn't helped out Neville one bit. What he had provided was just an illusion of help. Neville was now looking at his arm instead of paper. He could still very well get caught if he was careless and someone saw him revealing the password on his arm. Plus, now, Neville was under the assumption that he would have to return to AID offices to reset the password and refill the ink in his arm. Neville had gone from simply writing the password on parchment, which he did on his own, to writing the password on his arm, which required Quinn's assistance. Quinn, of course, knew all this, and despite that, had chosen to use such a solution. No. To better phrase it, Quinn had given Neville the solution, knowing that it wouldn't help out Neville. Quinn wanted Neville to retain the problem and repeatedly return to his office to avail his services, as that would enable Quinn to increase the amount of help he handed out to Neville. A day would come in the future when Neville would feel that he had gotten so much help from Quinn that he wouldn't be able to refuse anything that Quinn asked from him. Quinn sat on his bar stool, looking at where Neville had sat as he tapped his fingers on the table. Eventually, a soft closed-mouth smile made its way to Quinn's face. Like a spider watching a butterfly flying towards its web. This marks the end of part 26 of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.